Welcome back.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Did you have fun?
Oh my gosh, I had
Canada?
like the most amazing time, like 6 weeks away,
Yeah.
right? So I saw, like I went paragliding.
What? Really?
Yeah, I went
Oh
paragliding.
my God, I'm so
and
scared of
I
heights.
literally
Cannot do that.
had to jump off a mountain, and the guy's like, all right, jumping off now. And I'm like,
Wow.
really? Okay. So yeah, you want to sit over there?
Here?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, so like I was, the mountain was there. Chào mừng các bạn đến với chương trình Dive với Cát Thảo. Trong buổi lặn hôm nay, Cát Thảo và một người bạn rất thân của mình sẽ trò chuyện bằng tiếng Anh nhé. Trân Huỳnh là một chuyên gia đầu tư xuyên quốc gia đầy kinh nghiệm. Với một hành trình đặc biệt, chỉ rời nước Úc để quay về Việt Nam vào năm 1999 với tâm thế không chỉ là trở về quê hương mà còn là minh chứng cho tầm nhìn và quyết tâm đóng góp cho sự phát triển của quê nhà. Trân đóng vai trò then chốt trong việc thu hút các nhà đầu tư nước ngoài vào lĩnh vực bất động sản tại Việt Nam thông qua vai trò của mình tại những công ty quốc tế và các quỹ đầu tư giá trị hơn 70 tỷ đô la Mỹ. Bằng chuyên môn trong ngành đầu tư bất động sản, Trân đã định hình bối cảnh bất động sản công nghiệp ban đầu của Việt Nam, đóng góp rất lớn cho sự phát triển và quốc tế hóa của ngành. Trân là một nữ lãnh đạo truyền cảm hứng, với sự dũng cảm để khám phá bản thân và tìm thấy ý nghĩa của hạnh phúc. Cô là một người mẹ đã học được ý nghĩa của việc dám yêu bản thân. How do you feel?
Good.
Good.
The vibration is great.
Right?
I love the singing
Such
bowl.
a great bell.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into it, I want to play a game. So this app is called Dive With Me. And the audience can also play and use the app as well, Dive With Me. So it's a series of random questions.
Okay.
And there are 5 levels. Each level corresponds to your level of openness in terms of, you know, the question, how hard it is in terms of your vulnerability. So to start off, what level do you want to start with?
I think I've already reached half a century, so I think I've already gone through a lot, so I can start at any level basically. Don't go to 9.
Don't go to 9. Okay. It doesn't go to 9.
Okay.
So level 5.
Let's go to level 5.
Let's go to level 5. Let's play. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm going to have to answer the question as well.
Okay.
So let's do rock, scissors, paper to see who's going to answer first. Okay, ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Okay, that's me. Oh, jeez. All right, you do level 5 and you read to me what the question is.
Okay, level 5. Oh, describe 2 most difficult decisions you had to make in your life.
Oh, done. Oh my God.
Love it.
Wow.
Well, I have to answer that
You
too,
have to
right?
answer
Oh my
that
God.
too.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, give you time to think. Okay. Well, the first, which you know about.
I know. I had a sense you would relate to that.
Yeah. I think many people who've seen my episode on another podcast would know about it too. So it was very difficult for me and my husband to get pregnant. Finally, when we were pregnant, we were thinking we were going to have a baby girl. And I named her after my mum, Mai. And the first place that my husband and I lived on was on the street Huỳnh Bửu Trân. So her name was Mai Kim.
My king.
And Angie was after the head of Germany, Angela Merkel. So Angie, my Kim. We were very happy. And then what happened was we went to a doctor and she told us that this baby has so many problems. Her spine, her heart, her fingers, her nose, everything. And she said, you need to stop this pregnancy.
Yep.
And I didn't know what to do. It was a very difficult decision. And I remember sitting in the clinic and I told, so Tony was sitting there, my husband, and then I had to go do a blood test. And I was sitting there and I looked out into the waiting area and he was surrounded by pregnant women. Everyone was like this. Some had their husbands, some didn't have their husbands. And I saw his face and there was no more life. He was just staring into space, like staring. And I couldn't say anything. He couldn't say anything. We got a taxi to go home, and in the taxi was silence. I just could hear the sound of my heart breaking. And, you know, I'm sitting in the taxi and everything is normal outside. There's a person, you know, selling cafe, someone, you know, like going to work. And I'm like, how can these people be so normal when my world is breaking?
Yeah.
And I still couldn't say anything to Tony, and Tony couldn't say anything to me. The first thing he said was he moved to my tummy and he said, baby girl, Angie, my Kim, we still love you very much. And this result from the doctor doesn't change anything.
Did that give you more courage to speak up?
Yeah. And then I told him, this is the most difficult decision. We know she's going to die. The doctor said she will die. And then we made the decision to still go ahead. To still go ahead. And every day he had to use the ultrasound to check, is she still alive?
Yeah.
And every day at 7 o'clock at night, we were waiting for her heartbeat. Waiting. And then, you know, when she was born, it was so sad but also happy, because I was like, I can't wait to meet you. I can't wait to see your eyelashes. I can't wait to see your eyebrows. But we know it's also the end.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing journey. And I learned so much about gratitude, you know, so biết ơn. I learned about compassion, and I learned to be a better leader. And that was the most difficult decision I've ever had to make. And I think we could summarize it to one, not two.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I also remember, Trân, when I came back to Vietnam, you were the first person, and Trang, sitting with me. And all you did was cry with me.
I remember.
And you can't change the outcome.
Yeah.
But just, you were there. Your heart was breaking with me.
And I think that takes so much courage, because I had some friends who disappeared. Some of my friends completely went silent and disappeared because they didn't know how to be with my pain. And so I lost friends. But you were there, and that's why I respect you so much, because the leader that you are is also the human that you are.
I think the pain actually helps us. And when you really feel the pain, like fully embrace the pain and share it with your friends, that gives you a different level when you become a leader and how you share situations. Because I just share with you, a friend who's younger, she actually watched your podcast that I shared with her. And she is in her 30s, she's Vietnamese, working, always wanted to achieve a career. And about last year, she was thinking, because she doesn't have a partner, so she was thinking to freeze her eggs, because she thinks she's obligated to be a mother. And she had a talk with me, and I said, are you ready to be a mother? Is this the right time? Are you only doing this because it's what is expected from your family and what you think is the right thing to do?
As a Vietnamese woman.
Yes. And she goes, I don't know. I said, well, why don't you think about it first? And then she thought about it, and she realized she wasn't ready. But then when she saw your podcast and how you shared about, your identity and you wanted to be a mother, but it doesn't mean that everybody on earth needs to be a mother, and how you found that, she found that so freeing and inspired.
Wow.
So I think, Tao, what your storytelling and how you share with people, you don't know the audience and the level of people that can hear that and learn from that. I think it's through those pains that really shape us and how far we can grow as just human beings.
I love you so much.
So, love you too. So you don't need to do two, because I don't think I have to either.
Okay, one's enough.
I think
one's
I think,
intense and heavy.
I think depends. Maybe my second one will come later in my life. Hopefully not.
Oh my God. So what was the
yeah.
most difficult decision you've ever had to make?
Okay. So the most difficult decision I had to make was actually to say to my ex-husband that it's over. And so when I came here, I met him. We ended up building a family. I ended up building a career here.
Yeah.
And everything was going well. And we have 2 beautiful kids from the marriage. But when I found out that he was having affairs, and I really, really tried to understand why, and I questioned, what did I do wrong? Am I not the right partner? Am I not a good mother? Am I not a good friend? Why is this happening to me? And just like you, I felt I was in quicksand. I was just falling, and there was no bottom. So I think at that point, I quit my job. So that was 2014.
Yeah.
So I quit my job, took some time off, and just spent time to reflect. I did meditation with Peter. It was great. A lot of meditation and a lot of writing and journaling. And I decided, let's give it a chance. So I tried. But as I'm also starting to learn about myself and look in, like, what do I really want? What is my life purpose? Who am I? Asking these deep questions. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Asking these deep questions, I started to also find a bit about me.
Yeah.
And then also the ability to say, there's no use staying just because of the kids. just because you want to hold it together, and if you're not happy, because you'll both make each other miserable. So in the end, he did come over, and I said to him, look, I'm not happy, and I don't think you are happy either. So let's do it the right way for the kids, and I want you to be happy.
Yeah.
And I hope you also want me to be happy. So I think it took me like a year and a half to accept that.
Wow.
So that was one of the most difficult decisions for me, because I was scared that I would lose my identity because I'm not a wife.
Wow.
And it would change me.
Yes.
But then I also realized that my identity and who I am is what I make it. It's not because I have to be with him. So I think that was a lot of work. It took me a lot of work about asking about myself. So diving really deep. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the most difficult decisions, because I was like, well, okay, I'm going to be a single mum now. How am I going to handle it? My kids were still young.
And I remember that process for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you being there. So, yeah.
And it took so much courage, but it was also not overnight.
No.
Right?
It's time. It takes time. And
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of time. You know, even, you know, it's been, you know, probably about 9 years now that we haven't been together. And we're still very good friends. He still sees the kids. I think the kids are with him at the moment on holidays, and he's always present for them. But I think we've also both moved on. But I think also we moved on in different ways. But yeah, it does take time. And you know that you can redo and relearn different things. Yeah.
I found you so inspiring, because you had to go deep to ask, if I don't have this husband, if I'm not a wife, and whatever happens to my kids, if I don't have this job as a, you know, chief this or whatever, who am I?
Yeah.
Do I still have my value? Who am I if I
Yeah.
don't have those things?
Yeah. And you ask, no, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Why did it happen to me? You know, like, what did I do wrong? You know, so you have so many questions that you question yourself. And you have to face certain insecurities, certain fears that you have. And I really got to understand, and I love one of the things is that sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to be comfortable.
Wow. Sometimes you have to be uncomfortable in order to be comfortable.
Yep.
I think what is extremely powerful is that you take time out to reflect. You know, and I work with CEOs, I work with a lot of different people, and they don't take the time out to reflect. They don't take the space out to go, why did I do this? Why am I feeling this? What is driving that? How do I therefore change my situation? And so I think what's amazing about you is you have that discipline and that curiosity, and you want to understand your own feelings.
Yeah.
You're not afraid of it.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing, because I think some people may look at it like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Maybe it's a bit selfish. But for me, I find that I couldn't really dive into that emotion if I'm still being distracted by going to work, by other noise around me. So I tend to just withdraw. So when I withdraw, I really like to just be on my own. And sometimes I don't want to go see people. I'm not in the mood to socialize, and I like to just be around close family and friends who are just there. And sometimes you just have those family and friends that you don't even need to talk about the situation.
Yeah.
You just need them just to be there.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And I think everybody brings a different part to that.
Yeah.
And I think and the friends just accept that, yeah, you just need time out.
Yeah.
There's nothing more than that. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
You know, Zhang, I what really, really inspires me about you is the mother that you are and the relationship that you have to your kids.
I don't know if I'm a good mum, but
Oh my
I try
God,
my best.
Zhang, seriously, let me just say, we attended your birthday dinner recently, very small. You know, there was like, I think 6 people, you know, at the dinner. And your teenage daughter, okay, teenage daughters, it's sometimes intense, but your teenage daughter said, I am so grateful to have you as my mother. And she said to all of us, my mother is my best friend. And you have Erwan, who's 21 now.
Yep.
And
this week, yeah, he's
this
21.
This week, he's 21.
Yeah.
And you talked to him about sex.
Yeah.
And you shared with him about healthy, respectful sexual relationships.
Yeah.
And every time Tony and I watch you interact with Erwan, interact with Morgan, your daughter, and your son, we're just like, wow, this relationship that you have with them and how you are with them, it's not, I'm just going to say, it's not common, Zhang. I mean, what's your parenting philosophy? Like, how do you parent your kids?
Actually, I was never prepared to be a mum. I didn't know what's the right thing or to do or what you should avoid. And you read books when you're pregnant. And I think society has a perception of what a mother should be.
Right.
And you think that, oh, that's what I need to do. I need to make sure they're eating well, all this stuff. But I look back and I remember my childhood with my parents. And, but, you know, you probably have similar.
Yeah.
You know, our parents were working really hard and we had school. They were never around there to give us that emotional connection and support.
Yeah.
And I really missed that. And I never had that. So I don't know if it was wrong or right, but when I had my kids, I always wanted to be there. I wanted to share with them. They could talk about anything to me because I never had that growing up.
Yeah.
I only got it later in life, you know, when my parents had more time, you know. But I understood why my parents did that. And I think I wanted my kids to also be able to understand there are certain times when I also wasn't there for them here because I was working. And I couldn't be there to all the parent-teacher conference. I couldn't do all that, but at least I'm there for them after school. And I can talk to them. And some of the things that I also noticed is that society now is very different. They have so much noise and social media and friends and, you know, you talk about bullying and that and trying to fit in. So I just took the initiative just to say, hey, you know, Mum's made a lot of mistakes growing up. And I shared with them stories about me making mistakes. And in the end, I never tell them this is what you should do. I just share with them my mistakes and the choices I made, but then what I learned from that. So I found that if I shared with them, I'm hoping that they would share back with me.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a certain philosophy.
Yeah.
I just thought, like, if I just share with them about my childhood, about where I am today, I'm hoping that they will share back with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think I embarrassed my kids a lot in front of their friends, only because, you know, like even talking to my son about sex, like what you said, you know, I even gave him books to read.
Yeah.
And
I know you gave me a copy of that book too, and I looked at the pictures and I'm like, whoa!
No, because
look at these positions.
Yeah, no, because like I think when you want to really understand yourself, right? There's 3 parts to you. There's your physical being present in this world.
Yeah.
And respecting your body, right? And accepting your shape, your size, your color, whatever it is, you gotta accept your physical being, right? And what sex also is a very intimate between two people,
Yeah.
right? And to be able to accept that intimacy and to also accept sharing that intimacy is also sharing the respect you have for your body and also for your partner.
Yeah.
And to be able to connect, right? So when you can connect at that level, then you can also then really look deep at connecting at your spiritual side too and your emotional level.
Yeah.
So sex is not just, okay, how many head counts or whatever they do now. It's just part of us understanding and bringing connection, intimacy between our
respect.
physical and respect,
Yeah.
and appreciating and sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the openness that you have with your kids, you share your, I guess you would say, your life experiences, and then they have permission to share their mistakes
Yeah,
and to share who they are.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, when you told me that you gave Erwan that book, and then you gave me that book, and that you were having a conversation with him about, like how to understand your body, how to respect it, how to communicate, and sex is a form of communication, and
Yeah.
it can be very beautiful.
yeah,
And as a mother, to do that to a son, I
Yeah.
found it very interesting because I feel like mothers, say this to their daughters, but for you to have the level of openness to have this conversation with your son is so beautiful. What's the relationship between being a good parent and being a good leader?
the relationship for me, I think one of the commonality is that you got to compartmentalize in a way. Because being a good leader, your work is that when you're there in that present, you got to be in that moment to give it your 100%,
Right.
right? To be with your team and focus on that. But when you're doing it, you're still yourself, your true self as a leader, right?
Right.
And then
So you're not faking a different persona.
you don't
You're still
pretend. You still have the core
authentic,
values,
yeah.
and you still be yourself, and but you just show it in a different way,
Right.
at the work environment, and you have to be present,
Right.
right? And then when you're home with your kids, you also then need to be present, because there's quality times that you have
Right.
that you need to switch off.
Right.
And learning to do that, it's not an easy process because it took me a while too,
Right.
there were moments where I put my work above
The family.
I remember times where we went on summer holidays and I was still on my phone doing emails to the point where the kids are waiting for me and let me finish this and that. And I was doing that and my kids were going, Mom, come on, and I realized, I've, taken their time for work when I should be 100% with them. So I started to adjust that.
Right.
Yeah. And totally switch off because sometimes the work and an email answer can wait. But the moments that you have with them cannot because, it's a treasured moment and
Yeah.
they're young and they still, you cannot ask back time.
Yeah.
So I learned that over the years to do that.
Because your kids were basically telling you, Mum,
Yeah.
you're not being present
Yeah.
with us.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And it's good that your kids can speak up to say that to you.
Yes.
I love that. Because my kids did. My mum was
Yes.
going, can you not answer emails next holiday? And that's when I was going,
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
How old was Morgan when she said that?
I think she was about 6, 7 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Because, I go to like really nice restaurants or something, and then I will see mum, dad, 2 kids, and they're all like this at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And they're not talking to each other.
Yeah.
They go on holidays and everyone's just like this.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just, again, how you made an environment where your daughter is comfortable to voice and tell you how she feels. And then she gave you data,
Yeah.
but you did something with that data.
Yeah.
It's not just like putting it in the rubbish. you responded,
Yeah.
which then gave her more confidence that next time I tell you something, you will do something about it.
Exactly. So, you know,
Okay.
it's the same as like when you are working, right?
And managing staff.
Yeah, and you want to share your opinion about a project or an idea, and then the staff doesn't agree or has another input, it allows them to speak up, right?
Yeah.
And if your team is not able to contribute, how do you even know that you're going in the right direction or have listened to everybody in the team?
Yeah.
As a leader to make decisions, because then you're just forming a decision based on certain things that you're seeing in the data of the project and based on your experience, but maybe there's another different angle that you haven't considered. So when you allow your team members to also speak up, even whether they are an intern, the junior staff, you know, they have a voice too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, how you were running, you know, your companies and also being a parent, there's a lot of similarities. You know, like you allowed your staff to give you feedback. And when you create an environment of safety, when they tell you something that you don't agree with or is not your own opinion, you don't shut them down.
No. Yeah.
You take it in.
Yeah.
And then you respond, which gives them more confidence next time to share.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on the individual, right? Even when you're working in certain environment, you may have certain team members who would speak up, and sometimes they try to take advantage of the situation.
Oh, really?
You know, like it could be also they want to override to show off. There's ego involved, right?
Oh, okay.
It's just like, you know, any teachers in a classroom. You've got students with different, you know, characteristics, and you just need to be firm at certain stages. Sometimes you need to actually help lift up some people, right?
Wow. So how do you know then what to do depending on the person? So say the example of that person giving feedback going, I'm just saying this in front of everybody just to make myself look good and not to actually contribute to the team goals.
Yeah.
How do you know what to do?
It's a process because you've got to look at patterns.
Ah.
You got to look at patterns, and you got to see when they say it, how often they say it, in what situation it is.
Yeah.
So I think it's just more like some common sense about patterns. And sometimes you can just say, okay, I take it. Sometimes you don't have to agree, but you can just show them that you've heard, but then you also want to ask other people.
Right. I think it takes someone who's very self-aware and also deeply confident to be able to know what to do when, and to be situational. You know, people talk about situational leadership, so it's not one type of approach for everything. And so the confidence that you have in yourself when someone says something, to go, oh yeah, I hear you, but doesn't mean that I'm going to immediately play your game if there's a game there. And you just go, oh yeah, and so you get patterns, you get the data.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you take it back, and then you evaluate, and then you ask, you know, other friends or other people that's in similar situation, right? Hey, how would you handle this, or what would you do? And I think that's also having good support system, you know. And one of the things I found here in Vietnam was that there's so many amazing, strong women, and I think the Vietnamese women are so resilient. I have to be, you know, like in awe. Yeah, basically. This country has got amazing women leaders, unspoken heroes, basically.
Yeah.
And I think everybody has different situation, life circumstances, but they still wake up the next morning and go to work and still come home and cook dinner and still do all those things, you know.
Yeah.
But there are certain points where you have to say, well, where do I fit into this?
What about me?
Yes.
Yeah.
What about me?
Yeah. So I want to sort of ask you specifically about something related to being a woman leader in Vietnam, especially in the business world. So as part of this episode, you did a Luminous Spark. and that is a personality profile
I
tool.
I don't know what's come out of that result.
It's a very interesting portrait, okay?
Okay.
One of the really interesting results that I found was that you are quite low on sociable. Okay. So in your natural state, you're 19% sociable. And then in your everyday state, it even goes less,
Yeah.
right? So you're less sociable even at work,
Yeah.
right? Now, you know, there's this belief, I think, in Vietnam especially, is that if I want to win business, I gotta nhậu. Okay, I have to đi giao lưu, I have to socialize, I have to go karaoke, I've got to like do all these things in order to get business. And I actually heard a guy I attended this conference, and this guy from the Mekong Delta, and he said, you know, ở miền Tây, nếu mà không có nhậu thì là không có kinh doanh được. But then, when he does this, his wife is upset. Tại tối ngày có đi nhậu không? You know, his wife is sad, his kids are sad. And so he said, but I'm doing it for you. But you are sad and upset at my behavior. So if your sociable is so low, how have you been able to succeed in Vietnam as a leader in the business world?
I actually don't like big crowds and events, but you had to do it to network, right?
Right.
And then I think as on my career journey, I realized that it's not just about the social, it's about you being a professional. If you actually do the right thing, you do your job right, and you're consistent in your delivery, regardless of your partners, your clients, and your customers, they will always come back. But you still, in society, need to have some media coverage. You still need to sit on panels. You need to participate because that's part of what's expected. So I actually am very nervous to do any of that. I hate it. It takes me a lot to have the courage, right? And so some of the panels that I sat on, I only do it because I feel comfortable with the host.
Yeah.
You know, and I know my topic, I know my industry, so I'm comfortable with that I have the knowledge. But I'm quite selective on terms of who's actually hosting. Like, you'll see me do it a lot with Trang because I'm comfortable with her.
Yeah.
And I'm here today because I'm comfortable with you to share. But yeah, it's hard. It's not easy, and I think I'm still learning about that.
Right.
And learning what to do. But I think I am at a stage now where I know what works for me. And I changed it around as well because I realized that social events doesn't need to mean that you have to go and drink alcohol. You can still network with your clients, your partners, in ways where it's more yourself, right?
Okay.
So I would do dinner. I would cook dinner at home. I enjoy cooking. I'll invite them to smaller, group session.
Right.
And that's more intimate. And you can speak and you can share.
And that's more you.
And that's more me. And I would do more of that rather than going to nhậu.
Right.
So towards, the better half of my career, I did more like one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because I feel more comfortable in those settings. So I turned it around to suit my comfort zone, because then I think I'll get more out of it rather than just having very surface talk. Because when you go to big events, everything is just so surface. How can you share stuff or situations about a business or wanting to have more insight if you've only got 1 or 2 minutes standing there with so many people around you?
Right. So what would you say to a younger person who's just like joined a company, right? And they're working in sales.
Yeah.
And they're female and their boss is like go nhậu with this group of people and they don't want to do it, or actually not even female, let's just talk about males.
Yeah.
I have a friend who he just quit because he prepared he's a head of marketing, and he prepared a huge campaign,
Yeah.
right? And he went to present. And then that client, after 15 minutes, the presentation was supposed to be an hour. After 15 minutes, the guy was like, thôi, được rồi, hiểu rồi. Thôi mình đi nhậu nha. So then he's like, okay. So him and his boss went to nhậu, but he doesn't drink any alcohol.
Yeah.
So he was sitting there the whole time where they're getting drunk. And he's just like, what is my value? I have no value if I don't drink. And it's just them two talking. So he ended up quitting his job.
Quitting his job. Yeah.
But it's sort of so difficult for a young person to go, you know what, that doesn't suit me, but I need money.
Yeah.
So how would you navigate that as a
I
younger
think
person?
depending on the younger person's situation, but the ability that this person that you said that quit his job means that, wow, that takes courage.
Yeah, it does.
It does take courage, right? So you got to look back. If you got courage, then regardless, you will still find another job, because I don't think the job defines you. It's you make you, right? So you define yourself. So I think with time and finding your right career, or people always say, oh, am I at the right job? I don't really like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't like to be social. But you can either you love your job, but you may not like to be social, then you voice it up and you say, you know what, I'll attend these way, but if we're going to do social, I would like to do smaller social. But you can express that,
Yeah.
right? That's one thing. Or if you feel that that's not the right job for you, because as expected, because it's not your personality profile,
Yeah.
then I think, and you have the courage to leave like your friend did,
Yeah.
then when you have that courage, it will come back to you. You'll find something that will, don't give up.
Yeah.
I think it's more like not giving up. And I don't think you should fit into a form of you have to be social.
It reminds me of when I was a CEO, much younger, and I was trying to win a client, and then a colleague of mine said, go nhậu with this government authority. And, that's what we have to do. We have to get inside information. And so it was at like one of the hotels, and there was all men. And she asked me as the head of my company to come and be sociable, right? She said, this is good for your business and this is also good for my business. So I was in my early 30s. Everyone's getting drunk.
Yeah.
And then after a while, one of the guys started to sexually harass me. And he asked to have sex with me. He said, let's go to a hotel. And I'm like, I am a CEO and I'm an international lawyer.
Yeah.
How am I here?
Yeah.
And it was really difficult, because I feel that at that time, I did not have the confidence. I didn't have the confidence to even understand what are my preferences? Like, what do I enjoy? What do I not enjoy? Do I like what situation? I didn't have the confidence to actually say no.
Yeah.
And I had to say, blah blah, some crap thing to try and không làm cho họ mất lòng mình, blah blah, giữ mặt mũi, whatever, all this crap.
Yeah.
And I felt like, wow, I didn't have the confidence as a young woman to stand up for myself.
Yeah.
So how do you develop that so that you can actually be yourself in a work setting and also in relationships, in life?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky in the sense that I met some really wonderful people that I look up to.
Right.
And
so like mentors
and support systems, girlfriends
Friends?
that can actually share and that help you through that.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really difficult now for the younger generation because they've just got so much noise as well, right? So I think one of the things I think that's important is that when you see someone that's got the potential and to be a mentor,
Yeah.
I think that's giving back, right?
Yes.
So I do take on a few that I get build close relationship to.
Yeah.
And I think by doing that, I'm also hoping that if I do that, one day when my children enter the workforce, they will also meet a good mentor too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like paying it forward in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think asking deep questions like this app that you're doing would be great, right?
Yeah.
And having those deep talks and trying to understand what DNA you are made up of.
Yeah. Understand
As-
yourself more, basically.
And when you understand that more, then you will understand more what kind of decisions and choices you'll make for your career.
Yeah.
And then start to face those, dark side. You have shadows. I mean, when you look in the mirror every day and you go, oh, do I like what I see? What other parts I can improve on?
Yeah. So I think to young people, the relationships that you have in your life are a safety net.
Yeah.
And who are the 5 people that you are spending the most time with outside of your family? Who are they? And are they a reflection of the person that you want to be?
Yep.
Do they share your values?
Yep.
Do you have a mentor? And the mentor often is like not your parents.
Yep.
Because, sometimes your parents, depending on their circumstances, they might not be emotionally supportive. But like a wise older person who's lived enough of life and pain to give you the wisdom and to be that person for you. I think a lot of young people don't have that.
Yeah.
One thing I want to know, Zhang, is that you're around your circles of friends, you are very famous for being very generous. But what is the boundary between being generous, moving over to being exploited, or people taking advantage of you? What is that boundary?
I think it's hard to say that there is a boundary.
Right.
Because I think my nature has always been giving.
Right.
In the sense that, because I'm not attached to the money, the title, but I'm attached to trying to connect. And some people that come to your life, I think there's a purpose and a lesson that you have to learn.
Right.
And I'm happy to make those mistakes, but I did it basically based from the heart, right? And I learned from that. But maybe some of those lessons are things that I have to learn. I don't know if I should set up boundaries. I do set up to a point where, okay, I will give, but depending on what they're giving back to me in terms of that relationship,
Right.
is that something that's okay, or actually it's becoming toxic, or actually, no, I don't accept. The moment that I don't accept, even though once I give and I've raised it up and they don't change, then I cut. So there's another side of me, Tao, as well that
Yes.
you haven't seen.
I think I've seen it just very recently with a certain person.
Yeah, so when I cut completely.
And these are some friendships that you've had for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did it recently with a friend from high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've done it before with another business partner.
Another business partner?
Yeah. Because, like you can put, and I always want to give it my all.
Yeah.
Because I think whatever happens, I don't want to live with regret.
Right.
In terms of a regret of a friendship, a partner, a colleague,
Yeah.
So if I really tried in every way possible, then I can never say I didn't try my best and I
Yeah.
don't have any regrets.
And what's the sign? Like, yes, you give them a chance, but what's the sign when you're like,
I'm just going to raise this issue, and I'm like, things aren't going right in this relationship, like the friendship or whatever. What's the first feelings that you have to tell you that, not happening, not going well?
Yeah, it's just some like a gut feel somehow.
okay.
It's just like a gut feel, like something's not right. Then you just then look back at patterns.
Patterns again,
And-
data.
Yeah, and you go, hey, and then you also ask like, hey, did I allow that to happen? So if I don't allow it and I voice up, let's see what happens,
Oh.
right? And then you ask yourself, is that the situation because I allowed it to happen? And why did I allow it to happen? Was I in a very vulnerable state and they knew it? Or was I not thinking clearly? Where was my headspace at that time? And then I ask myself like, why did I do that?
So there's basically an investigation process.
Yeah.
Say you're talking about a friendship.
Yeah.
And you feel like this friendship isn't great. Maybe they're using me, right? Maybe they're using me. And you're like, okay, what happened? What was my feeling at this stage? You're trying to gather data. And then you're going through this process whereby you're going to voice it, because if you let that happen, you also go through a process where you say, what's my responsibility in this?
Yes.
Because I'm
Yeah.
letting it happen
Yeah,
too,
exactly,
right?
yeah.
And if you continue to let that happen,
Yeah.
that's
Why are
on
doing
you.
it? Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
on you.
Yeah, and why are you doing it? Like, why are you letting it happen?
Why are you letting it happen?
Yeah, and sometimes also you get messages and signals from other friends that sends to you. But then you also think like, great, my friends love me, they're sending me messages, but do my friends really know the whole situation, or they've just observed it from an outside, so they've also made assumptions, right?
Okay.
So we always have to go through that whole process, and
Yeah.
it takes time,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
and I think it's always just human nature to always make assumptions,
Right.
because we make assumptions based on what we think the circumstances are,
Yeah.
because we also don't understand why the other person is doing that.
Right.
And sometimes if they've actually shown effort to make change,
Yeah.
then you have to give them a chance.
Oh, yes.
If there is core things, because when you look back, was that person there for you at certain situations?
Yeah.
And if they did show up, why would you disregard that just because other people don't like that person?
Yeah.
But the other people may not know that they were there for you. And
Right.
if people are willing to make a change,
Yes.
then you should give them a chance.
So you're in your 50s, so fabulous, so incredibly, you're becoming more yourself,
Yeah.
you know. A great musician, Miles Davis, he was a jazz musician, he played the trumpet, and he had this amazing quote: sometimes it takes a long time to know how to play like yourself. Because you grow up, and if you're a musician, you're a filmmaker, you're whatever you are, you imitate.
Yeah.
So you idolize and you copy people.
Yeah.
You're an architect,
Yeah.
whatever. You have all these greats.
Yeah.
And you've got to experiment and live enough of life where you go, what does me feel like?
Yeah.
And what is the expression of my creativity? What is that's me?
Yeah.
And I know that for you, it's a journey of becoming yourself. But there was a time where you started to become more yourself. You know, like I've known you for more than 10 years now. And there was a time when you started to become more yourself, and you started to be more just authentic. And you were doing khí công,
Yeah.
and you were doing like so many different things.
Yeah.
Like,
when was that point for you, and what do you think helped you the most? You were doing meditation and different energy, you know, chữa lành bằng năng lượng and so many different things. So what was the point where you felt like you started becoming more yourself, and what helped you the most?
The point was that I started to, through the whole meditation process, and when I was working with doing Reiki and trying to find more about me, what makes me happy, how do I tick, right?
Yeah.
And then going through that whole process allowed me to really look at myself and love myself. And learning to love yourself takes time too, because you also have to realize that there are parts of you that you don't like. And then there are parts of you that you need to say, hey, you know, I don't like that, but I can change slowly. And sometimes I also think of this like, sometimes your strength is also your weakness. And sometimes your weakness is also your strength.
Yes.
It's just depending on the situation and the circumstance.
Yeah.
So when you know and understand how to utilize or understand that strength and that weakness in that situation, you become more comfortable with your being. And I think also, as now I'm getting to 50, I get to this point now, it's like, when is enough enough? When is it just for me? When is it just me time, right? So I started to love myself more, in a sense that I can have my own sports, I can have my own enjoyment, and it's just my space. And you need your own space. And that's how you recharge, right? You learn it from meditation. It's with the breath work. It's all about you. And sometimes that silence is also good, right? And so I started to, you know, when I stopped going into the corporate now, it's been over a year, I started to go to the gym.
In the business world.
Yeah, in the business
you
world,
left
right?
the business
I've
world.
just left the business, like the 9 to 5 kind of thing.
Yeah,
But I'm still there, but it's more like doing things for myself and working on projects that I enjoy, right? So I now go to the gym. But it's also my son goes to the gym. So we have things that we can talk about. And I want to be healthy. And, you know, I'm proud that, you know, I can reach certain goals. And I push myself. I'm not competing with anybody for the gym. It's just myself, right? And recently I took up golf, because golf is, you know, it's a physical and very much a mental game.
Yes.
But you're not competing with anybody but yourself, right? To really hit and feel and swing the ball, it's all here, right? And that's the biggest challenge, right? And we have good days and we have bad days. And that's why I love going there. I mean, like I was there yesterday with Tony.
Yeah.
And he was saying to me, you know,
much, John.
you're doing it too much now.
Doing it too much now.
How many
Too
times
much
do you at
golf.
the driving range? I said, 4 times a week, you know? He's going, no, too much now.
So
you know, like I gradually learned to just be very comfortable and love myself. And I think the energy then comes out, right? Yeah.
what does it mean to love yourself?
I think be able to forgive yourself.
To love yourself means to be able to forgive yourself.
Yeah. Forgive yourself for all the things that you think you've done wrong or you should do, you know, because you yourself have your own expectation. You yourself think that this is what I should do as a daughter. This is what I should do as a mother. This is what I should be as a friend. And when you haven't done enough, then you beat yourself up.
Yeah.
But you gotta forgive yourself, because once you can forgive, then you can love.
Wow. So does that also mean, I guess when you say forgive, it's also a letting go of expectations on yourself that's been imposed by your parents, you know, your husband, your girlfriend, your
environment,
boss,
everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you accept that, then that's really letting go. And I think we're continually always working on it.
Yeah.
You know, you have different levels of forgiveness, and there's many things that you can forgive about yourself because there's so many parts to you.
Yeah.
And you just got to work at it one at a time.
Yes.
Yeah. You don't have to be perfect. Imperfect is beautiful too.
You can be perfectly imperfect.
Exactly.
Wow, Jung. So, what an amazing, beautiful conversation
Yeah.
this has been. We're sort of nearing towards the end, and so we have a couple more games. One is there's a set of cards here, and there's some words on the cards.
Oh, it's not like đánh bài or something.
Oh, no, it's not đánh bài. No, cái này không có đánh bài, không có.
Okay.
Không có sòng bài ở đây đâu. Okay, so you basically, we're going to have to go through each.
Oh, we have to do all of them.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm going to like let you see the word.
Okay.
And then the first word that comes to your mind when you see the word.
Okay.
Yeah. Children.
My kids.
Hủ tiếu.
Nam vàng.
Nam Giang. Hủ tiếu Nam Giang. Nice. Delicious. Road.
Path.
Path. Green.
Nature.
Soccer.
Injury.
Injury.
only because everyone had so many injuries playing soccer as a kid, and I,
Oh my God.
yeah. So yeah,
Ocean.
freedom.
Beautiful. Home.
Heart.
Heart. Heart.
Home.
Oh my God.
Heart is home.
That was not planned.
Okay.
That's so cool.
That's weird.
That's so cool. Oh, sign from the universe.
Sign from the universe.
Sleep in.
Snuggle.
Snuggle.
Yeah, like cuddle up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that.
Beautiful. Last one. Wow. Việt Nam.
Thank you. This is really the right card because I'm at a point where I'm thinking, wow, I'm so grateful for this country. It's really taught me a lot. And it's really hard because, my daughter has only got one more year left and my son's already in Australia. So planning to leave and the exit is also overwhelming too, because I know I've only got probably another year or two. And letting go of that is really hard. And trying to figure out, I don't want to let go. And be able to have two places of home and heart.
In Vietnam.
And Australia.
Okay, so last thing. So it's another level 5 as we conclude.
Okay.
Oh my God. All right. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Level 5.
Oh God, I look at that face. Oh my God.
Okay, this is okay. If you know you were going to die tomorrow, how would you spend your last day on earth?
So I made this app so I know all the questions, and that's a really
This is
a really hard question. Nếu ngày mai mình biết mình sẽ mất, thì cái ngày cuối cùng trên trái đất này mình sẽ làm gì? Rock, scissors, paper.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Hey, I won twice.
my God.
You both have to go first twice.
Oh my gosh. Jeez. Wow. First of all, in answering this question, I have to think about, is there anything that I would regret? And until recently, there was one thing that I would regret. The relationship with my younger brother. We disconnected, because my younger brother was like my son. And I brought him up And every time there was a school meeting, I was there.
Yeah.
My parents were working. I taught him to tie his shoelaces. On the parents' committee, I was like a member of the parents' committee.
You were protecting him a lot.
I was his mother. And I was like a teen mum.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the skills to be a good mother. And so there was a time when he felt so suffocated by me and he couldn't be himself. And he had to push me away.
Yeah.
And that hurt me so much. And it was many, many years. And I had to look deep to understand what is my responsibility in this. And I began to change.
Yeah.
And I just want him to be him,
Yeah.
but really believe it.
Yeah.
So I apologized to him and I showed the effort.
Yeah.
And now we are close
That's great.
again.
Yeah.
Very recently.
Yeah.
Like the last year. And so because I wanted things to be different, there is nothing now that I will regret in my life.
Yeah.
So I think the last day what I would do is be with my parents, be with my brother,
Yeah.
my brothers, their kids. My mum would be making bún bò Huế chay because she's like ăn chay trường and I ăn chay trường and ba cũng ăn chay trường.
Yeah.
And her bún bò Huế is amazing. And we're just eating the best bún bò Huế chay in the world. And then the next day I would be gone.
Yeah.
And that would be and then also Tony would be there and maybe putting his piece of meat in the bún bò Huế.
Yeah.
And I'd be saying goodbye to the love of my life, my family and Tony.
Yeah. I think that's sometimes all you need.
You'll go.
It will be just with my family and my kids, my brothers. I mean, my family, we're very close. So I'm very close with my brother. I've been very lucky in that sense. So my mum and dad has really helped set us a beautiful foundation.
Yeah.
Where the three of us are really, really close.
Yeah.
There's no jealousy. We're always there. It's a tag team effort. And so I'm very fortunate. I have two wonderful brothers in my life. So I'll be with them, the family, their kids, my kids. But we'll be having a party celebrating my life. So lots of balloons, a lot of drinking, a lot of food. We'll do, the barbecue on the side and just celebrating life. I think that's how I would like to spend the last day of my life, is to celebrate life.
Well, thank you, Trân.
Thank
That
you.
was so... Oh my gosh, I love you.
Thank you, babe.
Love you too. And I just want to have a shout out to the crew, who really put in so much effort. Thank you everyone for joining us on this really beautiful special episode. Hope to see you next time on The Dive Show.
Bye.